Life can change in an instant. One moment, you're living your normal routine, and the next, you're facing a nightmare you never saw coming. That's exactly what happened to two sisters, Mia and Olivia, when they were arrested for a crime they had nothing to do with. It was a mistake, a terrible mix-up that sent them behind bars for 4 long years. They pleaded their innocence, but no one believed them. The justice system had already made up its mind. At just 22 and 25 years old, they had dreams, ambitions, and a future ahead of them. Mia was studying to become a nurse, while Olivia had just started her first real job. They were inseparable, always looking out for each other. But suddenly, their lives were ripped apart. From a warm home to cold prison walls, from laughter to loneliness, everything changed overnight. As days turned into months, and months into years, they never stopped hoping. They clung to the belief that one day, the truth would come out. They had no idea how or when, but deep inside, they knew they couldn't give up. And then, after 4 years of suffering, something happened. A discovery was made, one that would turn their case upside down. But was it enough to set them free? Would justice finally be served? Or was there another twist waiting for them? The truth was about to be revealed, and when it did, it would shock everyone. Stay with us as we uncover the incredible story of two sisters who lost everything, and what happened when they finally got a second chance. Mia and Olivia never imagined they would spend even a single night in jail, let alone 4 years. The day of their arrest was supposed to be like any other. They had plans. Mia was preparing for an important exam, and Olivia had a work meeting. But before they could even step out of their apartment, police officers arrived at their door. The sisters were confused, thinking there had to be some mistake. They weren't criminals. They had never even been in trouble before. But the officers didn't listen. Within minutes, they were handcuffed and taken away, their protests ignored. The accusations against them were serious, so serious that no one seemed to care whether they were actually guilty or not. The evidence, though weak, was enough to convince the court. A witness claimed to have seen them near the crime scene. Some paperwork, supposedly linked to them, was found in the wrong place at the wrong time. And just like that, their fate was sealed. The trial moved fast, too fast. Their lawyer fought hard, but it seemed like no one wanted to hear their side of the story. The system had already made up its mind. The guilty verdict hit them like a wave, drowning out their hopes. They were led away in shock, their families crying, their futures stolen. Inside prison, life was nothing like they had ever known. The walls felt like they were closing in, and every day was a battle to stay strong. They clung to each other, refusing to let the world break them. But as time passed, doubts started creeping in. Would they ever prove their innocence? Or was this their life now? 4 years later, the answer was about to come, but it wasn't what they expected. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Mia and Olivia had no choice but to adjust to their new reality. Prison was nothing like the world they knew. The walls were cold, the food barely edible, and the nights felt endless. But the hardest part was knowing they didn't belong there. Every single day, they woke up wondering if this nightmare would ever end. At first, they thought the truth would come out quickly. Someone would realize the mistake. Someone would step forward, but no one did. The world moved on, leaving them behind. Friends stopped visiting, and even some family members began to lose hope. But Mia and Olivia never stopped fighting. They spent hours in the prison library, reading everything they could about wrongful convictions, searching for a way to prove their innocence. Meanwhile, outside the prison walls, something wasn't adding up. The case against them had always been shaky, but no one had questioned it, until now. A young journalist, Daniel Carter, came across their story while researching wrongful convictions. Something about their case didn't sit right with him. The evidence was weak, the witness testimony inconsistent. The more he looked into it, the stranger it seemed. Why had no one investigated further? Why were key details overlooked? Determined to find the truth, Daniel started digging deeper. He spoke to people who had been involved in the case, examined old records, and followed leads that had been ignored. And then he found something, a piece of information that had been buried, something that could change everything. But getting to the truth wouldn't be easy. Someone didn't want this case reopened. Someone wanted Mia and Olivia to stay exactly where they were, and Daniel was about to find out why. Daniel raced against time, taking Eric's confession to the authorities. With pressure mounting and media attention growing, the truth finally cracked wide open. The real mastermind behind the false conviction. A powerful businessman with deep connections, someone who had orchestrated everything to protect himself. He had framed Mia and Olivia to keep attention away from a much larger crime. As the truth exploded into the public eye, the sisters were finally freed. But just when they thought it was over, a final shock came. Someone had broken into Daniel's apartment again, leaving behind a single note. Asterisk, this isn't over, asterisk. Mia and Olivia stepped out of prison as free women, but they weren't the same people who had walked in 4 years ago. The world outside had changed, and so had they. The relief of being released was overwhelming, but so was the weight of everything they had lost. Their youth, their dreams, and their trust in the system, gone in an instant. Cameras flashed as reporters bombarded them with questions, but all they could think about was taking their first deep breath of freedom. Daniel watched from a distance, knowing this was only the beginning for them. The businessman behind their wrongful conviction had been exposed, but powerful people like him didn't go down easily. Even with the truth out, there were still those trying to cover their tracks. The note left in his apartment was proof of that. Someone wanted to remind him that the fight wasn't over. For Mia and Olivia, adjusting to life outside wasn't easy. They had to rebuild from nothing, finding jobs, reconnecting with family, and learning to live without the fear they had carried for so long. But they weren't alone. Their story had touched people, and support poured in from those who had followed their case. They weren't just forgotten victims, they were survivors. As for Daniel, he knew there were still more stories like theirs, more innocent people trapped in a system that failed them. He wasn't going to stop. The note left behind wasn't a warning to him, it was motivation. And so, while Mia and Olivia took their first steps toward a new life, Daniel picked up his pen and started writing again, because the truth had set them free, but the fight for justice was far from over. Daniel knew he was onto something, but the deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. He found records that didn't match up, statements that had been altered, and most importantly, evidence that had been completely ignored during the trial. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure Mia and Olivia were convicted, but why? Who had framed 2 innocent sisters, and for what reason? As Daniel got closer to the truth, strange things started happening. A source who had agreed to speak with him suddenly backed out, refusing to even answer his calls. Files he had seen before were now missing. And then one night, his apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, except his notes on the case. It was clear now. Someone was watching him. Someone wanted him to stop. But Daniel wasn't backing down. He contacted Mia and Olivia's old lawyer, who had always believed in their innocence, but had never been able to prove it. Together, they retraced every step of the case, looking for the missing link. And then they found it, an old security camera footage that had been overlooked. The footage proved one thing: Mia and Olivia weren't even near the crime scene when it happened. The problem? The footage had been buried, hidden away in evidence storage, never presented in court. Why had no one brought it up? And more importantly, who had made sure it was forgotten? Daniel was now racing against time. If he went public too soon, the people behind this could cover their tracks. If he waited too long, Mia and Olivia would remain in prison, possibly forever. But what he didn't know was that someone had already discovered what he was up to, and they were willing to do whatever it took to stop him. Daniel thought he was being careful, but he wasn't the only one watching. One evening, as he was heading home, he noticed a black car parked across the street. It had been there the night before, too. When he turned a corner, he glanced back. This time, the car started moving. His heart pounded. Was someone following him? He tried to shake the feeling, but it only got worse. The next day, his office received an anonymous tip, warning him to stop digging. No name, no details, just a simple message. Drop the case before it's too late, but Daniel had come too far to walk away now. He knew he was getting close to something big. And then, just when he thought he had everything under control, the story took another shocking turn. The security footage he had found, his key piece of evidence, disappeared. The storage facility where it was kept reported a technical issue. The original files were gone, erased as if they had never existed. Panic set in. Without that footage, he had nothing. Whoever was behind, this wasn't just powerful. They were careful, covering every loose end. But Daniel wasn't the only one fighting for the truth. Inside the prison, Mia and Olivia had started to notice strange things too. A guard who used to ignore them suddenly seemed nervous around them. A new inmate arrived, whispering that she had heard their names before, names connected to someone important on the outside. Someone had wanted them locked away, and now that same person was afraid the truth was coming out. The sisters weren't just victims of a broken system. They were caught in something much bigger. And now, with Daniel closing in, the real question was, how far would their enemies go to keep them silenced? Daniel knew time was running out. The missing footage had been his strongest piece of evidence, but now that it was gone, he needed another way to expose the truth. He retraced his steps, looking for anything he might have overlooked. Then it hit him, the witness. The same person whose testimony had put Mia and Olivia behind bars. If the witness had lied, then maybe they knew more than they had let on. He tracked them down, a man named Eric Dawson. When Daniel finally got him to talk, Eric's voice shook with fear. He admitted that he had been pressured into testifying against the sisters. Someone had given him a large sum of money and a scripted statement to read in court. At the time, he didn't question it. Until now. He never expected anyone to come looking for him again. But when Daniel pressed for more details, Eric hesitated. "I can't say more." "They're watching," he whispered. And before Daniel could ask who they were, Eric abruptly ended the conversation and disappeared. Meanwhile, inside the prison, Mia and Olivia sensed something was shifting. Guards started treating them differently, as if they knew something was coming. Then, out of nowhere, they were told they were being moved to a different facility, but something felt off. The transfer wasn't on any official records, and when Olivia overheard a hushed conversation between two officers, her stomach dropped. They weren't being transferred, they were being silenced.